Reggie, are you freaking kidding me? Yeah. Reggie, are you freaking kidding me? I'm the best shooter this game has ever seen. You think you're gonna be able to ice me?
From Reggie Miller frozen at the line as a rookie to Magic Johnson being told the shot was coming to his face, to Xavier McDaniel beaten on the exact spot Bird called, every legend who dared him tells one story, and the coldest part, he warned them first. The legends line up to tell it. The clearest proof of how badly Larry Bird destroyed people is that the people keep telling the story of themselves. Ask the men who guarded him and they do not describe a loss. They describe being taken apart. Legends still sit down on camera to relive exactly how Bird destroyed them. And the strange part is that the shame never fades. Hall of Famers, All-Stars, hardened veterans, all of them circle back to the same helpless feeling. Bird told them what was coming, and then it came.
Who says that in the middle of the game? He said, I'm gonna wait till you get one step away from me and I'm gonna shoot it right in your face.
It happened up and down the league. Magic Johnson heard it in the middle of a game. Xavier McDaniel heard it in a tie game. Dennis Rodman heard it as a rookie. Dominique Wilkins heard it in a Game 7. The arenas change and the names change, but every man tells a version of the same event, and every version ends the same way. He said it, and then he did it, and they were left standing there. Watch enough of these interviews, and the pattern sets in. Different players, different decades, different jerseys, and the same confession over and over. They were warned. They knew the shot was coming. They still could not stop it. That is what turns a highlight into a legend, and it is why the men Bird beat became the loudest witnesses to how good he was. So this is a case built by the victims themselves. Start with the rookie who thought he could outtalk him. Reggie Miller would grow into one of the loudest trash talkers the league ever produced, but in his first year, he made the mistake of testing Bird at the free throw line. Miller chirped. Bird set his feet, turned his head, and answered him.
Reggie, are you freaking kidding me? Yeah. Reggie, are you freaking kidding me? I'm the best shooter this game has ever seen. You think you're gonna be able to ice me?
Then Bird made both shots. Kevin McHale and Danny Ainge laughed at Miller from the floor, and the rookie walked back down the court feeling small. He had learned the rule every veteran already knew. You do not start with Larry Bird because Bird is the one who finishes it. Then take Xavier McDaniel and watch Bird skip the weight entirely. Tie game, clock low, and instead of setting up in silence, Bird walked over and told McDaniel where he would catch the ball and what he would do with it.
He said, I'm gonna get it right here. I'm gonna shoot it right in your face.
McDaniel told Bird he would be ready. He was not. Bird ran off the screen, caught the ball on the spot he had named, rose over McDaniel's hands, and shot it in his face, word for word as he had called it. McDaniel, one of the toughest men of his era, could only stand there and take it. He would later call Bird the coldest player he ever shared a floor with. That is the shape of every story in this video. A player calling his shot is not rare on its own. Players talk. What made Bird different is that the talk was never a bluff. It was a forecast delivered in a flat Indiana voice, and it came true so often that grown men who won titles of their own still describe the feeling of hearing it and being unable to stop it. The words got inside their heads because everyone knew he could back them up. The legend was built on follow-through, not noise. So the question this whole video is built to answer is not whether Bird talked. Everyone knows he talked. The question is how a man could keep promising the ending of a play, a game, a shootout, and keep delivering it against the best defenders alive. To understand how Bird could promise the ending before the game had even reached it, we need to look at the one thing he saw on the floor that nobody across from him could. The prophecy. The unsettling truth behind every one of those called shots is that Bird was not guessing. He was living about 2 full seconds ahead of everyone else on the floor, watching a game that had not happened yet unfold in slow motion behind his eyes. Teammates and rivals kept reaching for the same haunting image. While the other 9 men were grinding through a game of checkers, Bird was quietly playing chess, tracing every screen, cut, and rotation 3 moves before the pieces so much as twitched. The people closest to him could never find ordinary words for it. Bill Walton, a champion himself, abandoned basketball language entirely and started listing geniuses, describing Bird as a blend of Mozart, Michelangelo, Steve Jobs. That reverence sounds like exaggeration until you watch what his vision produced. This was a forward who averaged 10 rebounds a game across his entire career, not because he outjumped anyone, but because he already knew where the miss was going to land before the shooter released it. His passing came from the same eerie place, threading the ball to a teammate who had not yet arrived at the spot. Bird had mentally marked for him. That gift is exactly what turned trash talk into prophecy. When Bird told Magic Johnson what was coming in the corner, he was not being reckless. He had already run the geometry, measured the closeout, and calculated the half-second of space he would have Magic. One of the smartest players who ever lived heard the whole plan out loud while the game was still live.
Who says that in the middle of the game? He said, I'm gonna wait till you get one step away from me and I'm gonna shoot it right in your face.
So Magic sprinted that closeout, lungs burning, exactly the way Bird had scripted him to. And by the time he arrived, the ball was already gone through the net. Bird had turned him into an actor in his own humiliation, then twisted the knife by telling him he had done all that running for nothing. The Xavier McDaniel sequence exposed the same terrifying precision, except this time the tiny margin of error became the punchline. Bird had narrated the entire game winner, curled to his spot, and buried it in McDaniel's face. But the shot fell a heartbeat too early, and McDaniel could only stand at the sideline replaying what he had just witnessed. Think about the arrogance folded inside that apology. Bird was not celebrating a dramatic buzzer beater. He was annoyed that his masterpiece had been 2 seconds too good, that he had left time on the clock he had meant to erase. For the man who had just been beaten, that detail was the cruelest part of all, and the forecasting did not even require a live possession to land. There is another night burned into Magic's memory, when he sat injured on the bench and watched Bird stroll past during warm-ups and promise him that he was about to put on a show. Bird then went out and dropped roughly 40 points, missing only a couple of shots the entire night. Magic could only shake his head afterward and admit he had known, the moment Bird said it, that he was in for a long and painful evening. That single walk back to the bench, and that helpless nod from Magic, capture what everyone who guarded him eventually felt. Not just beaten, but outthought so completely that resistance had never been possible. The prophecy was real because the calculation behind it was real. Yet a mind that's sharp does not appear from nowhere, and neither does the cold willingness to use it as a weapon. To understand where a vision this rare and a will this ruthless actually came from, we need to leave the arena and travel back to a small, hard town in southern Indiana. The fire, everything cold and relentless about Larry Bird, traces back to French Lick, Indiana, a struggling little town where the Bird family had almost nothing. He grew up inside genuine poverty, in a home that broke apart under financial strain, carrying wounds most fans never think about when they watch the highlights. In 1975, his father died by suicide, a loss that carved something permanent into a young man who was already learning to swallow pain and keep moving. Out of that hardship grew a competitiveness that stopped looking like a personality trait and started looking like a survival instinct. What makes Bird's rise so compelling is that the confidence you saw on the court was built on top of a foundation of deep insecurity. This was not a golden prodigy who always believed when he first left French Lick for a giant program. The pressure overwhelmed him, and he walked away from Indiana University after only weeks on campus, drifting home unsure of who he even was. That collapse could have ended the story. Instead, it lit the furnace. Bird became terrified of one specific nightmare, that somewhere out there another player was working harder than he was. That fear turned him into a machine. He was never the fastest or the highest jumping man on any floor, so he buried his physical limits under an obsession with repetition, timing, and craft. The legendary extra 10 or 15 minutes after everyone else had showered, the thousands of shots in empty gyms, the studying of angles until they became instinct, all of it came from that gnawing insecurity dressed up as discipline. Where other stars leaned on raw athleticism, Bird leaned on guile, hiding what his body could not do behind footwork, positioning, and a release he had grooved into something automatic. He built a fundamental master out of raw stubbornness, and then he demanded the same fire from everyone around him. That is the quiet secret underneath the swagger. The confidence looked effortless, but it was earned in empty gyms nobody filmed. Born from a boy convinced someone wanted it more. Nowhere did that ruthlessness show more nakedly than inside his own huddle. When a game tightened and points had to be scored, Bird did not politely ask for the ball. His teammates describe a man who wanted the moment so badly he would clear his own side out of the way.
Give me the ball and the rest of you guys get the hell out the way.
There is a brutal honesty in that demand, and the story behind it is even better because it reveals how completely Bird bent his own team to his will even when a teammate was rolling. On the night that line became famous, Kevin McHale had the hot hand, but the room already understood whose moment it truly was.
Kevin was the one that had the hot hand, but as we all know, Larry's the man.
That same swaggering certainty followed him into the one arena built purely to expose a shooter alone, the three-point contest. Bird treated it not as a competition, but as a coronation he had already won. He walked into the locker room, looked at the other elite marksmen in the league, and casually informed them that the only real question was who would settle for the leftovers.
Who's coming in second? You already know who's going to win this. And I got lucky because I almost got beat in the first round.
He then won the thing 3 straight times, sometimes without taking off his warm-up jacket, turning a room full of the best shooters alive into an audience for his aura. But here's what separates Bird from a simple loudmouth. The talent and the tireless work explain what he was physically capable of doing. They do not explain the temperature in his chest when the lights were brightest. To understand why he wanted every one of these moments more than the desperate men standing across from him, we need to look at the part of Bird that treated an ordinary basketball game like a fight for his life. The assassin, underneath the vision and the work ethic, lived something darker and more powerful. The thing that made opponents crumble. Bird did not experience close games the way other stars did. He summed up his own wiring in a sentence teammates never forgot, admitting that he hated to lose more than he loved to win. That single confession explains everything. A man built to chase joy plays loose in big moments. A man built to escape the agony of losing plays like a cornered animal. And that is precisely what witnesses saw when Bird's eyes went cold and empty in the final minutes. They called it the assassin stare, that flat, almost blank expression that fell over his face when the game turned serious. He would flip an internal switch, demand the ball in exactly the situations other players quietly hoped to avoid, and dare the entire defense to try to stop what he had already decided was going to happen. His confidence in those moments crossed the line into psychological cruelty, and rookies were his favorite audience. When a young Dennis Rodman, who would become one of the most suffocating defenders in the sport, drew the assignment of guarding Bird, Bird simply scored on him 4 straight times and then turned the humiliation into theater. He looked over at the Pistons bench and taunted their coaching staff about the fact that nobody could cover him, telling them they had better find somebody or he would drop 60. Even as Rodman fought to deny him the ball, Bird kept yelling at his own teammates to hurry up before the defense realized he was completely unguarded. It was playful on the surface and merciless underneath, the trademark Bird blend. That psychological edge was so central to him that he could turn almost anything into a weapon, even the way an opponent chose to defend him. Famously, he treated being guarded by a certain type of player as a personal insult, snapping that it was a disrespect to his game, and then making the defense pay for it. Every needle, every insult, every provocation existed for one purpose: to load the moment with more pressure than the man across from him could carry, and then to bury him under it. But the purest distillation of the assassin arrived in the 1988 Game 7 shootout against Dominique Wilkins, a duel that basketball people still speak about in hushed tones. The stakes were absolute, a deciding 7th game inside the Boston Garden, a whole season resting on 48 minutes. The Hawks had pushed the mighty Celtics to the brink, and Wilkins had spent that series rallying his team, warning his teammates that if they were not ready to fight, they had no business stepping onto the floor. Bird felt that same electricity crackling in the other locker room and answered it in kind. Wilkins, an explosive scorer in his own right, refused to shrink, and the two of them dragged each other into a fourth quarter that felt less like basketball and more like a gunfight. Tied at 86, the building shaking, the two superstars began trading haymakers, shot for impossible shot. Wilkins was magnificent, pouring in points that would have broken any other opponent. Then a teammate poked Bird in the chest and told him not to let that man score anymore, and something behind Bird's eyes detonated. He answered Wilkins bucket for bucket, off the glass, all net, driving to the rim, until his clutch three-pointer finally settled it and Boston survived by the width of a fingernail. Even in defeat, Wilkins understood he had been part of something sacred, admitting that one of them had to go home, no matter how brilliantly they both played. That was the will that destroyed everyone, the refusal to lose that overrode talent, exhaustion, and even the brilliance of the man opposite him. Yet that same devouring fire, the drive that made Bird impossible to beat, quietly demanded a terrible price from the body that carried it. To understand the full weight of what Bird did to win, we need to look at what winning cost him, and at the flawed human man hiding behind the cold legend: the cost and the crown. Before we count the cost, it is worth appreciating just how complete a player all that fire and vision produced. In an era of specialists, Bird was a devastating everything: an elite shooter, a gifted creator, a punishing rebounder, and a smart positional defender, all folded into one frame. The advanced numbers still glow decades later: a career player efficiency rating around 23.5, and a mountain of win shares that anchor his teams near the top of the league. He walked into Boston and engineered one of the great turnarounds in sports history, dragging the Celtics up by 32 wins in a single rookie season and going on to lift 3 championship banners. But that crown came soaked in pain, and this is the twist most highlight reels quietly leave out. In 1985, doing something almost comically humble, shoveling gravel to build a driveway for his mother back home, Bird wrecked his back, and it never truly healed. For the rest of his career, he played inside a body that was betraying him, a spine so damaged that team doctors had to physically realign it before games just so he could play. He competed in constant grinding agony, quietly wondering whether the next hard fall might leave him in a wheelchair rather than merely on the bench. Picture that reality against everything you have watched in this video, much of it delivered by a man who could barely bend over without help. When Bird finally retired in 1992, he described it as one of the happiest days of his life, because by the end the pain had drained away the joy the game once gave him. He had squeezed every drop of greatness out of a breaking body and walked away with nothing left to give. The private man behind the assassin was just as complicated. For all his on-court certainty, Bird's personal life carried real scars. scars. From a brief early marriage he came to regret to a long, painful estrangement from his daughter that shadowed him for years. His steadier second family gave him ground to stand on, but the contradictions never fully resolved. Even his fiercely loyal mother was famously a fan of his greatest rival, Magic Johnson, a small human detail that says everything about how tangled the real Larry Bird was beneath the myth. Even the legacy refuses to sit inside a single box. Bird went into the Hall of Fame and stood on the roster of the original Dream Team. Then, after his body forced him off the court, he walked into a front office and a coaching job and kept winning, becoming the only man in league history to be named Most Valuable Player, Coach of the Year, and Executive of the Year. The gift was never really about jumping or running. It was about seeing, and there's the final turn that makes the whole legend land. The rivalry with Magic, all that on-court warfare and vicious talk, eventually softened into one of the most genuine friendships in the history of the sport. The war was real, but so was the respect underneath it. Off the floor, the two men who had spent a decade trying to destroy each other became brothers. Proof that the coldness was a weapon Bird chose to wield, not the whole of who he was. So bring it all back to the question we started with, the one every legend in this story keeps circling. Why did Larry Bird destroy everyone? Because he saw the game 2 seconds early and told you exactly what he saw, because a hard childhood and a deep fear of being outworked forged a will that refused to break. Because when the lights burned hottest, his eyes went cold, and he wanted it more than the desperate man guarding him. And because he was willing to pay for all of it with his own body, playing through pain that would have ended weaker men, he announced the ending, paid the price in full, and delivered it anyway. That is why, when you ask the men who faced him, they do not talk about being beaten. They talk about being told. If you enjoyed this video, click on any of the cards on your screen.